Hey everybody, and welcome to the shop. My name's Grant and I'm a boat builder in northern Michigan. Today we're going to get started on the frames for the riverboat build. Now this may turn into a two-parter just because there's so much information to cover and I don't want to put anybody to sleep. Enough gabbing, let's get to it. The first step in making the frames for this boat is actually going to involve our lofting. Now this is part of the reason why I encourage people to loft a boat whenever they possibly can, because you really get to understand how everything kind of flows together. What you're staring at is the body plan if you've never been around boat plans. And we need to reduce all of these solid lines down to the inside of the planking, because typically just about every boat I've ever seen drawn is drawn to the outside of the planking, which is this solid line. These dotted lines are what the inside of the planking is. Some people would think you could just come in here, measure in your plank thickness, and draw a line parallel to what you had. That does work in some cases, but not all of them. There's a more accurate method, and that's what we're going to go over. When I do a plank reduction, I need this guy. This is just my preferred method. I'm sure there's others out there, so don't get angry in the comments.
Go away.
This is a bevel stick. Each one of these lines, hopefully you can see them, is actually a angle or bevel that I've picked up off the master bevel board that I use for all of my tools in the shop. Let me know down in the comments if you want to see how I make the master bevel board and how I've made these tools. What we're going to do is read the average on these stations. We're going to use 3 of them. So this is for station 12 that we're going to get the bevel of. Putting the 0 end of this bevel stick on station 11, we're going to kind of pivot it around, making sure to stay zeroed until one of these lines is parallel to our station we're trying to read. And this is going to give you typically the most accurate readout. Then, with that in place, making sure we're still zeroed, I always try to make sure I zero just a corner, not the full end if it's not available. We're going to come out here to station 13 and read what this bevel is. So I'm reading 16.5 heavy, so we'll just call it 16. Draw a line inboard, 1.5 to 2 inches, and then record what we just read there. So 16.5. Now you would do that same process up and down the frames if you're building a rounded boat where the bilge is curved through here instead of being a hard chine. You would probably need to take more readings throughout because you're going to change. What do I mean by that? Well, that's our next step. This is a Mylar bevel board that I made. Not to be confused with one of these commercially available bevel boards. They're useless in this instance. You need something you can see through and draw on. I've gone ahead and drawn a line on here parallel to this edge that is the plank thickness. Now, we just read 16.5 degrees right here. So I'm going to take my bevel board and find 16 degrees, kind of eyeball halfway between them, and I want what's remaining on the outboard edge of my bevel board and the plank thickness parallel to the line we're reading, which is the one we just put on here. And you set your plank thickness line going this way at the intersection between the one you just drew and your vertical line. That gives you the point right here. This is your plank reduction. If this were an extreme case, the bigger your bevel is, the longer that distance is going to be, meaning your plank would move farther inboard. This boat is planked so lightly it doesn't really change, but in bigger boats you would probably see an increase in your plank reduction at that station. So it's not always just a true parallel line to what you've already drawn. So you do that all over, and you do it for every station. The next thing that we would have to do is make a pattern. I like to use Mylar patterns. That way I have both sides of the boat drawn out when I go to assemble everything, and hopefully we get to that either in this video or the next one. Another method you can use is with the nails. If you're somebody that's followed the channel for a minute, you probably saw the last video where we first introduced this project. You watched me put nails down on edge like that and make the pattern for the stem knee. Just drive them in, and then you put either your mold stock, your frame stock, or just a pattern on there, press it down, and this should give you a bunch of points to connect with a batten or a rule. But I want to build this boat right on the patterns. So I like this because all I got to do is flip it over. I've got both sides right there. To start out with, I recommend you tack this sucker down. You don't want it moving around. If it shifts at all, you're going to build a crooked boat. It's that simple. So tack it down 2-3 places, and then I like to start out by copying my center line. I usually make my center line a different color, so it's an easy reference when I'm just staring at this thing at a glance. Then we can go out and start picking up points to use. So I will pick up my shear line, water lines, and the bottom of the boat. If you have other information that you think you might need, there's nothing wrong with picking it up. Like, this boat doesn't really have buttock lines in it. If I did, they would be running vertically through here, and you would poke at one of those if you wanted more information. Very basic design here. Once you have all of those points, I like to go back, draw it in either with a batten or in this case just an edge of a square. If you're going to be bending a batten around here, I recommend just skip the awl and just drive nails into each one of these points. Then you've got everything set and you're ready when you bend a batten around it to actually copy your pattern. While you're there, come back and write on your pattern what each one of those bevels is. Once you have that done, you want to square off of your center line out to your bottom point if you're building a skiff, so it's going to be straight across. Most of the time it's not a curved bilge. Pick up your bottom point and score across with your pen, and that will give you the angle you need here, and we'll go into the importance of that later. Also, make sure you label everything. It gets confusing, and if you got to jump around frames for some reason, you want to make sure you're not making a fourth version of the same frame. Before we mark out the frame that we just picked up, I'll show you one that I've already made, Station 12 obviously, but we need to understand the relationship of this bevel and the planking. This is what's known as a standing bevel. Our reference face is the narrower one, and this bevel is proud of 90 degrees from our reference face. If it went the other way, it would be called an under bevel. Because we are cutting standing bevel on these, we need to make sure when we go to our stock that we leave a little meat on the edge. Don't just line up the edge of our pattern because you're just cutting air. Probably an obvious statement to most people, but I've made dumb mistakes in the past and I figured I can try and help people avoid it. Now, I've made most of the frames for this boat already, so we're going to start out at station 2, where I have not made anything yet. And we're just going to take nails and punch them into all those holes that we already made. I usually tack both ends first, so it doesn't move around. And then one down here on the line we drew for the bottom. Take that one right back out. Now what we can do is come in here and make sure to write down the number that we had recorded for the bevel. So 19 degrees there. And then you want to do that as close as you can get to where you recorded it, so it's accurate as these are cut out. One thing I didn't mention that I probably should is these are called sawn frames, meaning the bevel is cut right into the frame to match what the planking is going to be at that point. That's enough information off of our pattern for this one. We'll just come in here with a rule, and I try to have all of the holes that we just cut are punched and run a little proud. I'm not overly concerned that all of the frame heads are the same length, and you will see why when we get down to actually building the boat. Copy the bevel off of the bottom. I'm also making these frames tapered. So the base of my frame, I'll mark out my measurement there. Then I'll come up here to my shear and just using the end of the rule, come out what I want there and just connect the dots. Try and do it in as few passes with the pencil as possible so it's nice and clean. That's all we need to go over to the bandsaw and cut this out. You'll notice when this is set up that these bevels change. So I've got 19 down here and 20.5 up here. And that's referred to as either a rolling bevel or a progressive bevel. All depends on where you're at in the world. And that's true of just about any part on a boat. You might be asking, how the heck do you cut a bevel like that? My preferred method is on my bandsaw that I've set up with another bevel board that was made off of my master bevel board. And I can come up here with the stick that's mounted to the table, and as I'm pushing my piece through, I can adjust either up or down to match what is coming up as the next number on my frame. I'm going to clarify all this now, because once I start cutting, you're not going to hear squat. Next step in the process is just to clean up those cuts. You can always do this backside that's square on a jointer, but my jointer's currently not in the shop. So, old school it is. Always watch your lines, make sure you're not going to go past them. That one's done. You can flip it over and we will do the bevel. Make sure you pay attention to your grain on these and try your best to avoid tear out. One of the critical things when you're doing sawn frames is you always save your line on the bevel side, wherever you had marked it from. Typically that's pretty accurate as far as your point goes. What you might have to do is tweak your broader side on the standing bevel when you put everything on the boat and we're checking it with battens. I usually use a good sharp rabbet plane to take care of all this. It gives you the opportunity to kind of skew it and roll with the bevels as they change. You're not changing any bevel here, you're just cleaning up your saw marks. If you end up having some of the saw marks still on the surface, don't panic. That will happen, and we're probably going to have to tweak these and ferrule them in as they go onto the boat. There's probably a slight discrepancy involved. At this point, we're just trying to get it down close to our line. That's that. I think that's where I'm going to end this particular video. One note I'll make before closing this one out is when you go to make the matching frame to this one for the other side of the boat, it's as simple as flipping your pattern over, and that makes sure that the foot of your frame has the same bevel on it, and also that your bevels end up on the opposite side, and you can still cut the frame on the same side of the blade as this one was cut. You just got to run it from the other direction. So this one I cut from 20.5 down to 19, so when I cut the other one it would be cutting from 19 to 20.5. May sound confusing, and if you need me to clarify it, let me know down in the comments and I will try to do so in the next video. That said, if there's anything that I can do to make these videos better and more enjoyable for the people that made it this far, leave a comment. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, and when you do, make sure to hit the little bell icon, and that way you know when the next video comes out. Give it a thumbs up, and we will see you on the next one.